Hi, in today's video we are going to talk about grain direction for a spindle turning. Hi my friends, how are you? I hope everybody is fine. My name is Daniel Vilarino. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Every so often I like to make a batch of bottle stoppers, and I do them in great amount because I keep giving them away, and they are a great gift, particularly for Christmas and birthdays. So once in a while I do some of them, and I am running low, so I need to do about 20 of those. Now, in the past I have done many videos about bottle stoppers. Actually, my first projects were bottle stoppers, and then I kept perfectioning the process and doing different styles with different hardware, etc. But today I would like to enter into some specific details about the selection of wood. And particularly in today's video I'm going to talk about the grain direction. Now, I have this piece of chestnut oak that I got from the center when cutting a couple of blanks. I have the round trunk, and then I eliminate the center where the pit of the tree is, and you can see the growing rings going in this direction. It's very stable wood, and you can see the grain going in this direction, like here. So from there I got this piece, which is a small blank, and you can see the grain direction is the same. So basically it's in the direction of the axis of wood turning. Then I got this other piece here that I cut it at an angle. It's an angle of 30 degrees, and basically I'm going to turn it like this to see what the effect of inclining the grain has in this particular piece. And then I cut this other piece that it would have come like this from the piece, the main piece, but I'm going to turn it in this way. So basically here the grain runs 90 degrees from the axis of turning. So I'm going to make the turning of these three pieces to show you the differences and the impact that the grain direction has in the finished pieces. That's today's video. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to work. The first blank I will try has the grain direction parallel to the lathe rotation axis. I am going to put it between centers and through it up. I am going to rotate at about 1800 RPMs, and I will use a skew chisel to form a cylinder. After these initial passes I detect some tear out, but this is relatively normal for this chestnut oak and its characteristic grain type. I am going to get the tool rest a bit closer. The tear out will get resolved mostly when the piece is fully cylindrical, but it is also convenient to do the passes slower and to do them with a freshly sharpened skew chisel to improve the cuts. I alternate passes in one direction and the other to keep the diameter even. You can see that the cuts happen in the lower third of the sharp edge. The surface has improved considerably, although there are a few tool marks that will easily disappear when I sand everything. With the spindle gouge I will make a convex curve or bead towards the end of the piece. That will be connected to a concave curve or cove more towards the middle. The reason for these curves is to show how the grain direction affects the design left by the good surface, depending on whether the profile is straight, concave or convex. I have sanded well the surface and I have applied friction polish so the grain will be more visible. I have frozen the image to see better the detail. Here you can see the grain direction and the different layers of the three growing rings that go in parallel fashion. In this other picture I rotated a little the sample and you can see a series of concentrical ellipses on the bead and several hyperboles in the cove. This gives a visual effect to the grain design of the piece, particularly if it will consist of several connected concave and convex shapes. In summary, the turning when the grain is parallel to the lathe axis is relatively simple, and as a result, the visual effect of the grain is also relatively simple. The next blank I will turn is the one that has the grain layers running at 30 degrees with respect of the lathe axis. As you can see by the marks I did, they run from the top left towards the bottom right, but when I rotate on its axis 180 degrees, now the marks run from the bottom left towards the top right. Therefore, no matter in what direction I will make the cut with the skew chisel, there will always be some sector where the edge is going to go against the grain. This means that I expect to find a certain level of tear out when making the cuts. Despite using the same cutting technique as in the previous case, often I see relatively big chunks of wood flying out. Please note that I am only making cuts from right to left. Here you can clearly see what I was forecasting, and you can see that the tear out happens when the edge pushes the fibers shown in black against the grain. But it does not happen when the cut and the fibers run in the same direction. I keep working in truing up the blank, and as you will see, often flies out not a shaving but wooden shards. When I finally achieve a cylindrical surface, the tear out has decreased notoriously, but you can still see some pits left by the previous passes. I have decided to change tool and try with this spindle gouge. This detailed spindle gouge has an elongated profile, and the contact between the edge and the wood is less than in the case of the skew chisel, so it seems to be doing a better job of generating shavings and working better on the surface, although there are still some remains from the skew chisel cuts. Yes, there is no doubt that the gouge is doing a better job than the skew chisel. I will shape this blank with a form similar to the previous one. I'm going to sand it and apply friction polish to highlight the grain. Okay, there is no question that the 30-degree grain direction gives the piece a special visual effect. In this image you can clearly see the parallel growing layers. And twisting some 90 degrees you can see these curves all along the straight part of the blank, which, in my opinion, highlights the grain much more than when the grain is parallel to the lathe rotation axis. Here you can see both pieces side by side, and another interesting point is that by inclining the angle 30 degrees, the separation between one ring and the next seems to become bigger. The last blank I will try has the grain at 90 degrees with respect to the lathe rotation axis. The points represent the ends of the good fibers. In most cases, this will be a typical situation for when we turn a ball blank, but it is much less common in spindle turning. I would expect that in this case there will be some tear out of the fibers, and because the grain is at approximately 90 degrees respect to the turning axis, I can see that the tear out will happen in two diametrically opposing zones in the blank. When we switch to the spindle gauge, the cut improves considerably. There is some tear out still, but it is less than with the skew chisel. With the gouge we get more shavings and less shards fly out. I have just sharpened the gouge, and you can see by the shavings produced that the cut has improved a lot. Finally, with the blank completely trued up, the surface looks in very good shape. In any case, something important is to take time to implement the cuts and not to try to remove too much material at once, and also to sharpen the tool often. I am giving this blank a similar shape to the one I gave to the two previous ones. After sanding and applying friction polish, this is the result. To tell the truth, I think I like a lot the visual effect of the grain in this direction. Because of the position of the three growing layers, the effect is like parallel bands, and even in the straight part of this sample, they look pretty nice. And here you can see the three samples side by side. From the point of view of the turning, I think the most complex ones were the 30 degrees and the 90 degrees. But from the point of view of the visual effect, I like those two much more than the one with the grain running parallel to the rotation axis. Okay, my friends, I finished turning the 3 pieces, and here you can see the first one. This is the one in which the grain direction is parallel to the lathe axis. Is nice, but nothing very special in general. So it's a turning that didn't really cost me too much work. It was easy to turn it with a skew chisel, and then I use the spindle gouge for the curves, but in general not much issues with the turning of this piece. Now, when I did the one with a 30-degree inclination, here you can see it, and you can see how beautiful the grain looks for the same wood. And basically just changing the grain direction makes a big difference on how the piece looks. The turning though was more complicated. When I was roughing the piece, I kept having these fibers that were, raising as a consequence of the turning. I had to switch from the skew chisel to the spindle gouge, and the spindle gouge had to be really sharp and use more carefully the technique for cutting. So that was a more complicated turning. And finally, this is the piece with a 90-degree angle. So basically, in this case, the fiber was running perpendicular to the rotation axis. You can see that also is a beautiful piece. It has a nice impact visually, but again, the same issue with the technique and the sharpness of the tool that were really important in order to make and complete this turning. So, as a corollary of these 3 exercises, we can say that if the grain is parallel to the rotation axis of the lathe, then the turning is easier, but visually may not be that much more, beautiful than when there is an angle on the grain direction, either 30, 45, or even 90 degrees angle, that visually provides more impact on the turning, but then the turning becomes more difficult. You have to make sure that the tools are very sharp and use adequate technique for the turning. So I hope that I will be using these techniques in the next turnings, particularly for bottle stoppers and pens, etc. I hope you enjoyed the video. If that's the case, don't forget to mark the like button below, make comments, and if you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, please do so. There will appear the button to facilitate the subscription, and it will be until the next one. Cheers!